Okay, good afternoon, everyone. That's on. We will go ahead and get started. It's 1 or 2 minutes after noon, so I can officially say good afternoon. Um, Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. Thank you for taking time to join us today. I'm Brian Whaley, and I serve as a staff here at the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. One of the things that we always talk about here as part of our mission is really to provide advocacy and education and leadership for Iowa's cattle producers. And this webinar and the webinars that we do highlights the critical role of education in protecting and obviously advancing our industry. There's lots of different things that we're hearing about right now in the news. And so protecting and advancing our industry as we combat some of those things is very important. Obviously, from an association standpoint, we want to keep our members informed on those emerging threats and any timely issues that can impact herd health, profitability, and obviously the future of cattle production in our state. Today, we're focusing on an important and developing topic. We have received several calls in our office on, and that's the Longhorn Asian tick. Recently, it was detected in Iowa, and this is an invasive pest which does pose significant risk to livestock health, and it can include blood loss, some disease transmission, and then obviously decreased animal performance. And we're going to get into that here in a little bit with our guest speaker. But our goal today is really to provide you with some basic knowledge to understand, monitor, prepare for this type of threat, as it's mostly been in southeastern Iowa at this time. But I think it's important for all of us to be aware of the potential impact that this could have on Iowa's cattle herds. So we're pleased to bring in an expert to you with some great insight and practical guidance. Some basic housekeeping things today, just so you are aware. If you have questions that you want to submit, please enter them in the chat. We'll do our best to respond to those questions at the end of the presentation, and chat to the host at the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. We are recording this webinar just for later viewing. And then you are on mute and will be throughout the webinar just because of the bandwidth and those things as we go through this session. So we'll get started. I want to introduce today Dr. Cassandra Olds. She's an entomologist at Kansas State University who's done research regarding in several species of pests. Recently has been involved in some studies specifically related to longhorn tick, and has been doing some work with one of our members down in Southeast Iowa. And so we greatly appreciate her taking time today to share some of this information with us so we can be more prepared and help monitor this as it evolves within our state. So Dr. Olds, I'll turn the presentation over to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We're happy to have you sharing today information.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. I got to visit Iowa for the first time almost a month ago now, and it is a beautiful state, and I had a blast, and everybody was so wonderful and generous. So I'm really happy to be helping you guys out however I can. First, most important thing, that is my email address and my phone number. If after this you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out at any time. And I don't say this lightly. We gave a seminar when I was in Iowa, and I've been just so touched with how many people have reached out after the seminar to really just chat about their situation, their risks, what they're thinking. So please don't hesitate to give me a shout anytime you need it. So we are here today because the Asian Longhorned Tick and the pathogen that it transmits has been in the news lately, and it's gotten people a little bit concerned. And I hope that by the end of this, we've moved from this sort of concerned panic stage to feeling a little bit more comfortable about what will be likely to happen and what you can do to mitigate it. And so the first thing really is, this was always a when, not an if. This tick was first sort of identified in 2017 on the East Coast, but to be honest, it's probably been there for a lot longer. We tend to only notice invasive problems when it reaches a high enough level. So it's probably been there for a lot longer. And what happened is the tick's just slowly been moving, well, actually rather rapidly moving east towards the West Coast. And we do have some climate predictions and models on where we think it will go and how far its distribution will be. But you can kind of see from this map, 2017 and all the way down, and now we have Iowa in 2025. And this is just what it is. This was always going to happen. And now that it has happened in your state, what are we going to do about it? And so the first sort of question that I think is quite interesting is answering the question of why has it been so successful as an invasive species? And why this is important is because why does it successfully establish itself so rapidly in a new area? So as Iowa is now being colonized by this tick, we're going to see it move quite rapidly throughout that distribution range. And so it's a three-host tick. And what this really means is that each life stage, so you have a larva stage, and this is not what we usually call the seed ticks, a larva stage, a nymph stage, and an adult stage. And so the larval stage feeds on one animal host. It's usually a small mammal. It'll take one blood meal for a couple of days. It'll fall off. It will spend some time in the surrounding environment, usually in the leaf litter and the grass, and molt into a nymph, take another meal, do the same thing, molt into an adult. And so where other tick species, you have to have an adult male and an adult female find each other on an animal host. So they have to both find the same cow, for example. And once the female's anchored into her position where she's feeding, she can't get out. So she's relying on the chance that a male is going to pick the same animal she's on and is going to be able to walk over to where she is and mate with her for her to lay eggs. The Asian Longhorned Tick can reproduce without mating. So that means that all the ticks that we find in the environment are females. None of them have to mate, and they can all lay thousands of eggs, which means that realistically, you just need one tick to be introduced into an area for an entire population to be feasible. And this is really why it's been so successful as an invasive species, but it's also why it's going to spread fairly rapidly, for example, in the state of Iowa, right? It's a very broad host range. They will feed on anything from birds to wildlife to domestic animals, and occasionally they have been known to bite people, although we're not high up on the priorities list. So when we think about how much animal movement we've got, you've got rabbits that don't respect boundaries. You've got birds flying in from other places. So this is really just an inevitable thing that this tick is going to spread throughout the environment and form these population pockets wherever it happens to drop off. So that's really why it has established itself as much as it has. And it's also why it makes it so difficult to control, because you can knock back tick numbers, but you will never be able to eradicate these ticks fully. And why we really care about it, Brian had mentioned that in overwhelmingly large numbers, it can cause significant blood loss, and we've got some pictures here. But for the most part, our primary concern with this tick is because it spreads a pathogen called Theileria orientalis. And again, cases began being reported in 2017, but again, most likely here earlier than that. There's 3 genotypes, which means there's 3 different strains of this pathogen. And what we really care about is this ICA strain, which is type 2. And this is the most pathogenic strain. And when you go and submit your samples to a veterinary diagnostic lab, this is what they are testing for. So often you'll get your results back and it will say ICA type 2. Important to note that once animals have been infected with this pathogen, they will remain chronic carriers for the rest of their life, and that they can be a source of infection for other animals. And while once they're over that initial hump of the bad infection and they survive that, we don't see too much in terms of production losses. Animals seem to conceive pretty well, and we don't have many issues with abortions, and the calves seem to be happy weights, and everybody sort of chugs along. But important to note is that animals that are infected can relapse. So you can have an animal that's chugging along just fine, a stress event happens, and it just gives the pathogen the opportunity that it needs to explode its population, and then you'll start seeing disease effects. So this is why we're going to talk about this repeatedly, making sure that we keep animals happy and healthy and low stress. So what happens is you have an animal that has never seen this parasite before, and a tick comes along and starts feeding, and probably in about 4-ish days, we know for sure in other Theileria species that it's 4 days, so we're making some extrapolations here. The tick, in the saliva that it's pumping out when it feeds to make sure that it can feed for as long as it needs to, it pumps out what is called a sporozoite. And you can see it here. It's this little squiggly thing. I'm going to get a lime green highlighter here. It's this little squiggly thing. This is the sporozoite, and the sporozoite enters a white blood cell. And once it enters the white blood cell, it, now I've got to get rid of this one. It lives in that white blood cell, but its main job is to get out of that, and it changes its shape because it wants to invade a red blood cell. And in red blood cell is where it needs to be to make more of itself, to replicate. And so it makes more of itself in this red blood cell, and the only way it can spread to new red blood cells is if it bursts out of that red blood cell to invade more red blood cells. And this is why one of the things that we see with Theileria infection, Theileria orientalis infection specifically, is anemia. Partly because the spleen, which does a very good job of pulling out any red blood cells that it says look a little bit strange, but also we have the red blood cells popping open so that these parasites can escape and infect new red blood cells. So anemia is one of those hallmark characteristics that we see. And it's really the stage of replication in the red blood cell that is picked up by a new tick. That tick then becomes infected and can go on and spread it to another animal. One thing that we have to keep in mind, in a similar way that we can spread anaplasmosis, which also replicates in a red blood cell, by using needles, sharing needles between animals. And this isn't just, needles when you're bleeding. This is anytime you're administering a drug, anytime you're vaccinating. If you're using a shared needle, you can spread it from one animal to another. And something that we are starting to investigate in my lab at the moment, but we don't really have any answers to, is, well, what is the role of the biting flies? Right? Any of us who have been in the Midwest in summer know that we have our fair share of biting flies. We have horn flies, we have stable flies, we have horse flies. And we know, at least for anaplasmosis, that although they're not terribly good at transmitting anaplasmosis, way less effective than a tick, they can do it. And so if you've got millions of flies, you just have numbers on your side. And so there is still the chance that it can be transmitted by flies. We're doing studies right now to determine if that is in fact true. So we've got a little question mark in there because we don't know, but they may play a role. And so, oh no, we've got this little line here. I'm just going to erase this and see if it'll get it. Okay. So most animals that we see are not having outbreak symptoms. So for me, the interesting fact has always been, as the word's getting out there, we're having people who are calling up and saying, well, I tested my animal for a completely different reason, and it came up as Theileria positive. And I'm surprised because we've never had any disease. So I want to make it very clear that just because you don't have these symptoms doesn't mean that you don't have it. It just means that your animal was infected but didn't develop disease. So we only see disease developing in certain animals, and what you will see is one of the most early symptoms is loss of appetite and weight loss. These animals will go off feed very, very quickly. They will have a fever. They will be lethargic. You might see them standing off to the side. They may isolate themselves. They just look pretty dejected. Their head may hang down. We get a lot of respiratory issues with Theileria infection, so they may hang their head down. They might be coughing, having difficulty breathing. Similar to what we see with anaplasma, you can get the yellowing of the membranes, you can get abortions. And the hallmark characteristic compared to anaplasmosis is we don't get any aggression. And at least for now, there's a different age susceptibility. For anaplasmosis, we tend to see more severe disease in our older animals. For Theileriosis, it tends to be younger animals or animals who are moved into a Theileria region as an adult that have never been exposed to it before. So again, these are sort of your hallmark symptoms. Really just keep a closer eye on everybody and look for anybody who's not eating and who seems to be lethargic. That being said, there are going to be animals who are infected and you will not even know anything's happened because nobody showed any symptoms. So that's almost the best case scenario, because then you have the parasite, you don't have any losses, but everybody has protection and immunity. Okay, so this is what people really, really worry about, is the morbidity and mortality. How many animals am I going to lose? In an outbreak situation, when it's the first time that these animals are exposed to this pathogen, you can have high mortality rates. Literature says 5 to 20%. You can have animals that get infected and recover, and then during a high stress or immune compromising event, such as a pregnancy, have a relapse. But for the most part, once an animal has recovered, it stays fairly symptomless for the rest of its life. We want to pay special attention to young animals, so under the age of 6 months, pregnant animals. Pregnancy puts you in an immune suppressive state, so it gives the pathogen just a little bit of a window to make hay while the sun shines. Keep a close eye on stressed animals. So we often see that bulls that are running with cows, they're spending a lot of energy doing other important jobs, and they can be a little bit more susceptible to the infection. But really where we're going to see it the most is any animal who is naive, which means it's never had exposure to this parasite before, moving into an area where we know the tick and the pathogen are present. And so this is when we tend to have those higher rates of mortality. Once you have it stable within your herd, you should see almost no mortality. Animals should get it and recover just fine and with very few symptoms of infection. If you do have an outbreak, unfortunately, we are pretty limited on our treatment options. So there are anti-thylarial drugs out there. The USDA is doing some work in seeing how well they work under the United States conditions. It's a large part a licensing. If we introduce a new drug, then we have to get withdrawal information, we have to get safety data. And what we really need is for producers to be calling up the people who represent them and say, hey, I want this drug treatment. We need to fast track. This can be pushed through the channels that need it to be pushed through if enough people are interested in it. So at the moment, we don't have an anti-thylarial treatment. One does exist. It doesn't sterilize the animal, so it doesn't remove the parasite completely. But if you have one of those animals who does have severe disease, it does knock the parasite back enough so that the animal can recover from the infection and then is immune. So in other Theileria species, it has been shown that treatment with oxytetracycline, and this is important, it's oxytetracycline, not chlorotetracycline, which we usually use for anaplasmosis. If you give this early on in infection, it can improve the outcome. This is not an approved Theileria treatment in the United States, so you can't just use it as your line of treatment. Because these animals have a lot of lung involvement when they start getting disease, it might be that the tetracycline is just helping keep secondary infections under control. So this must be prescribed by your veterinarian, so you'll have to talk to your veterinarian about what needs to be done. And in talking with your veterinarian, I think this is an important point to bring up now. You know, make sure you have a good relationship with your veterinarian, right? Find a veterinarian who does large animals in your area, that if you don't have one, and establish the relationship now, because they're busy people, and sometimes getting you on the books is easier if you're an established client. So start working with your veterinarians and make sure that you've got a really good relationship with them. Call them up, say, you know, what are they thinking about in terms of outbreaks and responses to that. Ivermectins can reduce disease transmission, but only if the tick vector is present. And so I really want to, when people sort of heard about this Theileria outbreak, everybody got very panicked and started just injecting ivermectins. And to be honest, this really does more harm than good. Number one, this is only going to work if you have the tick present, and the tick isn't present everywhere and will not probably be present everywhere. And what you do is when you inject with an ivermectin, you're doing a lot of other things that are side effects that you don't think about. One of which is that you're going to kill all the dung beetles that you have. We're having a hard time with our poor dung beetles. So they, as many of us are aware, that the products that we have for fly control, especially horn fly control, are not cutting the mustard anymore, right? They're very, very, we have crazy levels of insecticide resistance, so they're no longer as effective as they used to be. And so we're having to resort to things that we forgot about long ago, one of which are dung beetles. Dung beetles bury manure, which is the breeding site for horn flies and face flies. And so when you give an ivermectin to an animal, it will kill all your dung beetles. And so we're losing our last line of defense against flies, which have a way higher economic impact than Theileria ever will. So we want to be careful that we're really keeping in mind what are our priorities for the next 10 years, not just what are we dealing with right now. The other thing that we also see is that when we use injectable ivermectins, we see a huge problem with resistance to gastrointestinal nematodes. And this is also a huge economic sink. So we really want to protect these products for special use. So if you take nothing away from this talk other than please don't just mass inject everybody with ivermectins because you're worried about the Asian Longhorned Tick and Theileria. So one thing that you can do is keep animals relaxed and healthy. We have noticed trends that disease is often associated with animals undergoing stress. So this can be shipping stress. If you bring in a potload of calves from out of state and you bring them into your area, there is a certain amount of stress. They're undergone a journey, they're in a new place, they're in a new group, and there's a certain amount of stress involved in that. And stress does weird things to immune responses. We've all seen this in our day-to-day lives. When you get stressed, you get sick. So we don't always think about stress and disease being related in our animals. So as much as when you're very stressed, you get sick, when the animals are stressed, they get sick. So we want to really reduce the stress as much as possible. We mentioned pregnancy. So for the cow not to reject the fetus, you have to put the immune response, so you have to suppress it. And so this means that our pregnant animals are more susceptible. And then any other infections, right? If your immune response is having to deal with 5 other problems, it has less resources to give to a Theileria infection. Again, if you have an animal that is infected, any high stress events can cause a relapse. So we want to keep animals up to date on all vaccines. Don't make them fight off pathogens that they don't need to be fighting off. And then maintaining good nutrition and low stress is very, very important. How do you know if you have an Asian Longhorned Tick infestation? So it is a brown tick with no distinguishable markings. And I've got some pictures to show you coming up. Most people are probably going to detect them on the animals, but only once you've got a crazy level of infestation. So it's going to go unnoticed for a long, 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 long time before you reach these abnormally high levels of ticks. And by that time, it's established and you have it, and it's very difficult to get rid of. So ticks will be clustered together, and you'll find them selecting an area, often the ears, around the dewlap, around the udder area, in between legs, and they'll be all clustered together. And many of them will be in gray and engorged, like we have in this guy's hands here. That's because every tick that is an adult is a female, and every adult female takes a lot of blood. And this is why we worry about this tick. We don't really worry about other ticks, exsanguinating animals, right? It's fairly rare. But if you've got a small animal like a calf and it has thousands of these Asian longhorn ticks on them, it is possible that you can get significant blood loss and problems with an infestation. So this is my finger. I'm not a terribly big human being, and I've got, I would say, on the smaller size hands. So this is my fingernail for reference. You can see the larva is teeny tiny. It's going to look like anything else that we call a seed tick. The nymph is a little bit bigger, but you can see again sort of this brown shape and color. And this is an adult, just a little regular brown tick. You can get larvae, nymphs, and adults at the same time of year. So we don't have that. We have one part of the generation at a specific time period. Samples that we did in Iowa, we found all three in a pasture and happy together. You are most likely going to see this once infestation levels are really, really high. So on the left, we have we basically just drag cloth through the field, and we dragged our cloth through a clump of larvae. So the larvae hatch out of the egg, and they just basically wait there until they find an animal to move past. And then they'll just all latch on. In the middle, you have some adults, and we actually found a lot of these adults are in the seed pods. So if you want to go walking through your fields, pay special attention to these, the seed pods, the grass stalks, and you just see them. They just are layered in there. So there's 6 on this middle picture. And then on the right, we have another area where we have just the ticks congregating together on leaf blades and broken grass. So in these 2 pictures, there's 15 ticks on this little, where the leaf has formed this little grouping. And then on the blade of grass, we have 12 ticks. So astronomically high levels of ticks. So keep an eye on your pastures, walk through your pastures, look out for these ticks. When we're looking at on animal, so here we have a lot of ticks in the ear of an animal. Here we have them on the back of the animal, on the legs, in folds of skin, dewlaps, udders. Not everybody has infestations to this level. It takes a couple of years for the ticks to reach this level. You will not notice this until it reaches this level, but you may have it in your pastures already. And so when we're talking about evaluating your risks and creating a management plan, there really are 2 approaches. There's the one approach of keep it out at all costs. And this tends to be people's go-to, right? There's the scary thing. I don't want it. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure I don't get it. Hopefully by the end of this, you will realize that that's really not an option. And what we want to do is move our thinking more to get it stable as soon as possible. From what we've talked to people who have had outbreaks in multiple locations, your first year is a little bit rocky, but once you get through that first year, it seems to stabilize and animals are okay. And so one thing that might be crossing your mind right now is, well, do I have it? We're finding more and more people are realizing through testing for other things that they already have it in their herd and they did not know. This is honestly best case scenario because it means that your animals didn't show you that they were diseased. It means that everybody is stable. But for those of you who don't have it, your risk is really going to be different and depending on the individual. There's no one size fit all. It's going to depend on your location. Are you in an area where the tick can survive? It's going to depend on which sector are you, right? If you are a stocker entity and you're bringing cattle in from out of state, are you a cow-calf? Do you have an open herd, a closed herd? Where do you get replacement heifers from? Honestly, herd size matters, right? If you've got hundreds and hundreds of animals, it's very different to if you've got 20 animals. And the way you can manage it also depends on your resources. If you have an infested field and you have enough land that you can say, well, I'm just not going to put cattle on this for a couple of years, let the tick populations reduce, or do I need to make use of every bit of grass that I have? So there is no one size fits all. I'm going to give you some options. Not everybody can use everything, but at least something in here should work for everybody. So we're going to talk about the three things that are involved in the system. So I want you to think of a stool, right? A stool has three legs. When you have all three, it's pretty stable. All of us here, well, are at least interested in cattle. I am not fortunate enough to own my own cattle yet, one day. But I assume most of you here have cattle. You may or may not have Theileria, and you may or may not have the Asian Longhorned Tick. When these three things come together in the same place at the same time, you have the ability to move the Theileria infection from one animal to another animal to another animal. So maybe you just have cattle, and for now you don't have either the tick or the pathogen. And like I said, your first inclination is going to be keep it out of my herd. And this may be possible, but it really depends on where you are. So this is a map. On the left, you have the United States, and they did climate model predictions as to where they think that this tick can survive based on its current known distribution. And so on the right, I've blown it up for you. If you're in these areas, the tick will most likely establish and survive and be quite happy. So even if you don't have the tick now, chances are you are either just not detecting it or it's coming your way. So if this is the case, keeping it out at all costs is just not possible. Again, we talked about the role of biting flies. If we find out that biting flies are somehow involved in transmission, then all of a sudden the whole state becomes an issue of we probably can't keep it out of the whole state. So there's many scenarios where people have cattle and they're already infected. They just didn't know about it, and they may not have the tick. If this is the case, you can work to make sure that you don't get the tick, bearing in mind that you've got to look at where you live, and also that these ticks can hitch rides on birds. So just because you don't have it right now doesn't mean you won't have it. We don't know the role of biting flies. And the other thing is that there are alternative routes of transmission. So if you are using needles between animals, you can be transmitting it from animal to animal to animal. So even without the tick, I want you to start thinking about, is it worth investing some money in testing my cattle to see if they are or are not infected? Once you have all three of these coming together, what you really want to do is create and manage endemic stability. And this is a new word, but it's actually something that you've been doing all along with anaplasmosis. So we're going to chat a little bit about endemic stability. So it's a fancy way of saying you have high level of pathogen transmission, but low level of disease. So anaplasma is just part of our life, right? We just assume that animals are infected. You will have a certain number of animals that get sick, but for the most part, everybody gets infected, stays happy and healthy, and there are no problems going forward. So what we want to do is get us to a point where mature animals are given their first dose of the parasite when they're babies, and they have lifelong immunity, and they stay happy and healthy for as long as we keep them around. We want the young animals to be exposed when they're young, so still while they are running with their mamas, because the mom gives them a certain amount of protective maternal antibodies, which means that they get these antibodies from the mom through the milk, so that when they get that first exposure to the parasite can't outpace the immune response. So they develop a good, robust immune response, they get no disease symptoms, and they will keep that immune response throughout the rest of their life. For this to happen, you need constant exposure from ticks that either have a low infection level or a small number of ticks with a higher infection level. You can go either way. But what you want is your cattle have a low level of infection of parasites in their blood, but everybody is infected. It means that the ticks that feed on those animals pick up a low dose of the parasite, which means they give a low dose to the next animal. So we're basically just turning down the volume. Outbreaks, we have the volume set 10 out of 10 max. What we want to do is set it down to a level 2. We don't want to be at 0, we just want to be at 2. That way your whole herd gets exposure to this in a way that they can develop good, healthy immune responses. You should see no disease. Everybody should stay happy and healthy going on. You may occasionally have that rare animal that just doesn't tolerate it very well, but for the most part, your animals should be happy and healthy. So we're going to chat a little bit about some tick control options. And I want you to not think about nuking the whole thing and getting rid of everybody. Remember, we want to set up this endemic stability. And so what we want to do is just take the edge off things. And we can manage ticks in the pasture itself. And then we can also manage them on the animal. And so again, this is not one size fits all. Not everybody is going to be able to do everything. And I want you to think always about the risks and the rewards, right? Everything that we do has consequences. And so we want to make sure that we're making the right choices in what we do. So tick control, this may not be as relevant for Iowa and Kansas. We burn everything. But we have shown that burning, especially in the spring, is very, very, very effective in reducing tick populations. You want to burn before things start warming up. I always say if you can wear a shirt and no jacket, it's already too warm. We want to get them before the ticks start emerging out for the spring. Clear brush and hedge areas. When we collect these ticks, we don't drag in the middle of the pasture. We go straight to the tree areas. We go straight to waterways because this is where the tick is. They like to have high humidity. So eastern red cedars are a great, great, great humidity area. Anywhere where you see trees, anywhere around water. This is also where animals tend to congregate. So anywhere where you have your animals congregating and resting, those are special attention places that you want to pay attention to. So keeping grass short is very, very effective. So a tick's primary worry in life is drying out. And so in the leaves, in the grass that sort of shoots up to the sky, they will position themselves along that blade of grass to a point where they can catch an animal that passes by. But if it gets too hot and dry, they'll actually go down and hide in the soil area that's so just between where the soil is and the start of the grass, that sort of high humidity, shady area. If you keep your grass short, you then expose the ticks to sunlight, you expose them to drying out. So if you have a pasture where you have crazy number of ticks, this is one thing that you can do is just cut the grass. And then it will just expose a harsh environment to those ticks. We want to make life as difficult for these ticks as possible. So insecticide spraying, this is sort of everybody's go-to is, well, if I've got too many ticks in this, I'm just going to spray everything. This can work, but I would, again, say only if you have a pasture where there are so many ticks that it's causing significant issues for the animals. Because if you spray an insecticide, you're going to kill every other insect that's in that pasture. And a lot of our insects have a lot of beneficial roles, not just our dung beetles. We have pollinators and things like that. The other thing that I wanted to show, so on the right, you've got me holding a blade of grass, and in the red circle is a tick. This tick is all the way on the top of this grass blade, waiting for an animal to come by. This tick, if any environmental condition changes and it doesn't like it, it's going to go all the way down into this thatchy leaf litter area. If you are aerial spraying, you are only contacting the top level of the grass area. Your ticks who are in the bottom areas that are closer to the ground level are not going to be impacted by the spraying. So you're going to have to keep your grass short and then spray on top of that. Pasture rotation is something that can potentially be used. So on the right, I have another image. And so this is the tick hotspot over here. You see you have all these tree areas. We collected a lot of ticks from this area. Here is an area where small animals can move in and out. So it's a tree area, and we did find Asian longhorn ticks in this pasture, but way, way, way fewer than we did in the blue area. And then this last one in yellow, we found no Asian longhorn ticks. This area has no tree covers. So if you want to rotate pastures and pull animals off for a prolonged period of time, it's going to have to be at least one grazing period. So the area in blue is where we have cattle. In the pink and the yellow, we did not have cattle this year. It can reduce your numbers. It's never going to get it down to zero. But if you have extra space and you can say, well, I'm just not going to put cattle on here for a year or two, it does give you a little bit of time to knock that population of ticks back so that when you reintroduce cattle onto it, there will still be ticks, but it's not going to be in the thousands that you saw in those images before. So ear tags, this is an option for on-animal control. This is only going to be effective against the ticks in the ear. And so the ear is one of these places where the ticks like to be. Don't daisy chain. By what we mean is don't just let them hang free. You want it directly in the ear of the animal and make sure that you tag both ears. You're also going to want to do a good solid annual rotation so that you don't get insecticide resistance. Look on the box of the tag, and it's going to say aids in control of or controls. If it says Gulf Coast ticks and Spinosad ear ticks, it should be effective against our Asian longhorn tick. Pour-ons is something that we use a lot for hornfly control and tick control. Be careful which pour-on you use. You want to use a macrocytic lactone because that gets absorbed into the body and then it gets distributed throughout the blood. Our permethrin, our pyrethroids do have a limited amount of distribution, but it doesn't seem to be effective for whole body tick control. Whereas things like our pour-ons, our moxidectins, our cydectins do work. For dosage, make sure you get a good weight of the animal. So apply the correct dose. You need to have enough active ingredient in the body to kill the ticks, and apply head to tail. Spraying is a really good option if you have a spray race or a hand sprayer. Why I like this option is because you can use something like a pyrethroid and you can get to all the different areas that the ticks are. I really want to make sure that we avoid using injectable ivermectins. This is people's sort of go-to, but it really is a bad idea, not only for tick control, but fly control. I'm going to skip past this because of the interest of time, but basically you're just causing a bigger problem for more important things. The other thing is that just give it time. Cattle will naturally build an immune response to these ticks after enough exposure. And so these are on the left, you've got ticks that have never been exposed to an animal. And on the right, we fed ticks where the animal had exposure to ticks before. And you can see on the right, we have these ticks here that are a funny yellow color. And that's because the animals had antibodies to these ticks, and those ticks end up dying. So over time, they will manage their tick burdens. And this natural immunity is really what we harness when we use anti-tick vaccines. So what we do is we take a tick, we discover what's important for this tick to survive. We make it in the lab, we use it, and we inject it into cattle. Those cattle make antibodies. And then the next time that tick goes to feed on an animal that's been vaccinated, the tick dies. And so there is an anti-tick vaccine which does cover the Asian longhorn tick. It is not, we have not done any efficacy trials, so we don't know how well it works. And it is only available for purchase through your veterinarian. So you'd have to call up your veterinarian and chat to them about it. Big thing, you do have to revaccinate every 6 months to get good protection. If you think you have an outbreak, what you want to do is take a blood sample, a red and a purple top. If the animal's dead, take a spleen sample and submit it to an accredited laboratory for testing. If you have ticks, collect those ticks, put them in 70% ethanol, and you can also submit those or call me. I'll happily identify any ticks you have if you are concerned. And just to keep everybody, just to remember, the first year seems to be the worst. And then after that, there seems to be little or no long-term production issues. So good standard practice, keep an eye on everybody. Know your herd status. These tests are expensive. The PCR tests are expensive. But really, if you know what you have, you're half the way there to winning the battle. Stay caught up on your tick prevention. Keep animals happy and healthy. And just be overall vigilant. And then I wanted to just spend a minute on more of a philosophical situation. So how do we as an industry weather the storm and move forward as a community, right? We've got people who have it. We have people who don't have it. We need to remove the stigma of having either the tick or the pathogen. You did absolutely nothing wrong. If you decide after this, you know what, I'm going to go get my herd tested, and it turns out you have it, you did nothing wrong. This was an inevitable thing. Animals move, ticks move, you did nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong here. We have to start wondering, okay, who is going to buy our cattle? We've got to start talking about the elephant in the room. Do I tell people that I have Theileria? How am I going to sell my animals? It might depend which market you're selling it to. I spoke to a woman who is in a very niche market, and she got an infection. She had no disease. None of her animals showed any disease. She was testing for something else. They tested for this too, and she was shocked to find it positive. The buyer who was going to buy those animals pulled out. So this has the potential to impact our industry, but not in the way we think. I sometimes think we focus too much on animal loss, and we've got to start thinking about it's the buying and the selling. We want to be vigilant, but we don't want to panic. So I think we need to just, think about this ourselves, think about the conversations we have, think about how we talk to our neighbors. Your neighbor has it and you don't be scared. There's nothing they did wrong. It's how we move together as a community is how we are going to weather this storm. And always remember, help is available. I always put this is my cat Ninja, who is scared of everything. Don't be scared. Help is available. You can reach out to me at any time. And I believe we have a little time for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions.
So thank you, Dr. Olds, for that presentation. Just as a reminder, if you do have some questions, if you click on the ICA in your chat box and submit those questions, you can type those in real quickly there, and we'll get to those. Just kind of to start off, and just kind of as an overview, you spent some time talking about the ivermectin line, I guess I'll say. And I know there are many people, because of the flies, they take care of the flies, is there any, they maybe only use it in the spring and then they use something else in the fall. Is there any concern with a resistance there on that type of protocol or something else?
We're very, very worried about ivermectin, injectable ivermectin, full stop, no matter when you use it. So, when it came on, and we're worried about it from both fly and nematodes.
Right.
And so the problem is that it has a 5-month activity period. So once you are injected, it's in the body for 5 months. Once it's in there, you can't take it out. And so what we have is the serum concentration increases and then it tails off. So we've done studies here at K-State where we showed that you only have 100 days of protection. Our control hornflies and our treatment hornflies were the same level after 100 days. So you're injecting it, but you've only got 100 days, which is about as much as an ear tag gives you anyway. And the problem is that remaining part of the 5 months after you've taken off, 2 months, the remaining 3 months, the ivermectin is not enough to kill the flies, but it's enough to give them a dose to say, hey, there's this toxic thing, and you may want to think about developing a way around it. So it's going to accelerate the rate of resistance in our hornfly populations. It's going to do it for ticks. And so we had to introduce macrocyclic lactone ear tags because our pyrethroids and organophosphates weren't cutting it. If we use injectable ivermectins, we've lost that ear tag. So we are very concerned about it from a hornfly control. We are also very concerned about it from worms, right? We've seen people that I've spoken to who have used long range for a couple of years because it was working great, tested their worms, and their worms are resistant to ivermectins now. Again, same thing. It might kill it for that initial period, but you've got this long tail off. And I think often, we get into a situation where we do things because they're convenient. And no doubt, injecting once and having a long-term outcome, very convenient. But what we've sacrificed with that convenience is the resistance. And we're now, so I really, if nothing else, just really, if you're going to use an injectable, do it over fall and winter when we have less insect activity so that we're not driving that resistance.
Good. Thank you very much. We are not seeing any questions in the chat, which I have a hard time believing.
People are shy. It's also a lot of information to take in. But I really think, for me, I really hope that we get to the point where we're no longer panicked about this. We accept it's going to become, how many of us test our animals for anaplasma before we sell them off? Nobody asks you before you buy, I'm going to buy in 5 of your cows. Do you have anaplasma? We just assume that everybody kind of has this circulating. And my hope is that we get to that point with Theileriosis where it's just assumed that if you come from a region, that's what you have. If you move it to a region where it isn't present, as long as you don't have the vector, you shouldn't have transmission. I do worry about how we start having these conversations and people pulling out of purchasing out of fear. And I think, if you've got hundreds of cattle, you might be okay. But if you've got a small herd and you really rely on selling those 10 animals that you have each year and nobody wants to buy them because of fear. So I think we've got to start thinking about that. We have a question. Does a harsh winter affect the tick populations? That's a great question. Yes and no. So if you have a lot of snow, the ticks actually are protected by that snow. It forms almost an insulating blanket. If you have a cold, dry winter, ticks survive that less well. That being said, this tick does come from an area where it can survive a harsh winter fairly well. So I think even if we get a harsh winter, it might help you in terms of you may have fewer ticks the next year, but it's never going to eliminate the tick population. The other thing to think about is also when we see sort of tick populations explode, it's not just that the environmental conditions this year are really good for ticks. It's really what was the conditions last year and the year before, because many of these ticks take a couple of years to go from a larva to a adult. The longhorn tick, I think it's cycling through multiple generations in a year, though. We're just seeing all of them at the same place at the same time. And so a harsh winter might kill off some of them, but it won't get all of them.
Okay, I do have a question that came to me. Can you talk a little bit more, or describe again how burning pastures can be used to manage tick numbers?
Yeah. So we're wrapping up the study now. So what we did is we looked at the impact of burning on ticks, and we burnt either in late summer, so you're talking about August, September, fall is more October time, or spring, which we had as April. And so what we found is that generally burning will reduce tick populations, and it's significant. Like we have thousands of ticks where we didn't burn, handful of ticks where we did burn. Most effective if you burn in the spring. There's a few things that make a good tick burn. The tick that you only get protection where you physically burn things. So we have a field where we didn't burn very well, and you've got patches of green grass and patches of burnt. Where it's burnt, there's no ticks. Where there's green, there were still ticks. Ticks don't move. They don't sort of move around like flies move around. They are where they are. So you have to make sure that you get a good burn everywhere. You also want to make sure that you get that burn well into the tree line, because that's where most of our ticks are. That's also where grass tends to be greener. So even though I said burning in the spring is the most effective, what you really want to do is burn whenever your grass will catch fire. And so if you have an early spring and things get green really quickly, you're going to have less impactful burning from a tick management perspective than if you had burnt in the fall when things were really, really dry. You want to get good burning and even coverage of that area. The other thing that's important for tick burning is what we have found is that it's a sustained thing. If you burn, you've got protection for the next grazing period. So if you burn in April, you've got protection for the summer. If you burnt the previous year in October, you only still have protection for one grazing year. Because ticks lay thousands and thousands of eggs, their ability to rebound is astronomical. So you only get one growing season of protection from a burn. If you want to do, you can burn each year, and then you have that protection. But if you stop burning, it will come back. In Kansas, we burn regularly, so for us, it's part of the way we do things. But if you had a field which was highly infested, what you could do is you could wait for things to dry out and you could burn that field and just knock those ticks back and then see how they recover the next year. And really, monitoring your ticks is fairly easy. If you get a piece of white flannel, light color flannel, and if it's a square and you put a pole at the top and you just tie a string, so you've got this almost like a flag dragging beneath you, and you just walk through your pastures, and then you look at your flannel, the ticks will attach to that flannel. Pick those off, put them in ethanol, send them to us. We can identify what ticks you have. Go looking under trees, looking in the seed pods, pick off those ticks, send them to us. The knowledge is power in this case. The sooner you know whether your animals are infected, the sooner you know whether you've got the tick, you'll be able to then make a good management decision. And so, yeah, keep an eye on ticks.
So we have another question that came in here. It's in regards to being when you talked about it being a 3 host, does that have to be 3 different species? So a different one for each stage, or could that be the same species for each time it has to be fed?
So other tick species are a little bit more selective, and that the smaller stages like smaller animals. Honestly, Asian Longhorned Tick does not care. You can be any animal and it will be quite happy. In areas where we've done sort of adjacent sampling, we have found that we have more ticks in an area where we have livestock grazing versus having just wildlife. So the presence of cattle, they love cattle. All 3 stages will be on cattle quite happily. And so when you have a high density of cattle in an area, you're giving them a buffet, really, is what you're doing.
Very good. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions in our chat box on our end. I don't know if anybody's given anything to you directly or not.
Anything here?
So,
no.
Okay.
But
well,
yeah, people can reach out to me anytime. Please.
And hopefully we'll have her. And if you need her contact information, you didn't take it off the slides, we definitely can get that to you if you reach out here to our office. But Dr. Olds, we greatly appreciate your time today and the information you shared. I know it is a newer invasive pest here in Iowa, and so we're all trying to learn at the same time and kind of build that community awareness as you talked about. So we greatly appreciate your time and the information you shared today. And thank you everyone for joining. We appreciate it. And if you do have any questions, please reach out. There's her contact information again on the screen, as well as mine here at the office in Ames. So thank you very much for participating today. And we'll look forward to seeing you again when we do one of these in the future. Thank you very much. Have a great day.